It's time to eat.
What are you hungry for?
Sit down and get ready to consume an abundance of fantasy football knowledge from Ross Tucker and John Daigle.
Feed me now. I'm starving.
On the Fantasy Feast Eating Podcast.
Yeah, let's eat, baby. It is the Fantasy Feast Eating Podcast. We are presented by DraftKings. I'm Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman, 5 teams, 7 years, bunch of broadcasting gigs. Didn't mention this on episode 1 of the show that's so nice. We do it twice on the Fantasy Feast each week. But Saturday morning, I've got Navy at Air Force, 10 a.m. Mountain Time, noon Eastern Time. Navy's offense is electric. I'm telling you, like, electric. They've scored like 40-some points a game. Really, it's the best Navy team in a long time. Really looking forward to that one. Then Monday night, I am in the booth with Kevin Harlan, Westwood One, Monday Night Football, Saints Chiefs. We'll get into that game momentarily. Check me out on social media at Ross Tucker NFL if you want to see what I'm drinking and eating this weekend, which I know a lot of you enjoy, especially the press box food. Check him out because he's the star of the show, and I admit as much. John Daigle at NotJDaigle on social media, EstablishTheRun.com, where they got 2 other guys just like him, Adam Levitan, Evan Silva. Just make sure you use the code FEAST so you get that discount when you get the information from really one of the best websites out there when it comes to any type of information, props and fantasy, obviously. We already did episode 1 and the first 7 games this week. We got 7 more to get to with a couple teams on bye. We'll start with the Browns and the Commanders, John.
You watched Deshaun Watson play last week, and so anytime it seems like a good situation, I'm still tepid because Deshaun Watson is still very much struggling. I know last week's interception was not his fault. It hit off Amari Cooper's chest and went into the defender's hands, but you would think at least that Watson can get it done against this Commanders secondary because although Kyler Murray recently struggled against them, the surrounding games, Baker Mayfield finishes the QB2 in week 1, Daniel Jones the QB6, and Joe Burrow on Monday night, the QB7. So Deshaun Watson seems like he's put in the best situation possible to succeed if you're desperate for a super flex option or a QB2 in other leagues. And on the other side of the ball, we know exactly how the Commanders operate. Jaden Daniels obviously having closer to a MVP season than an Offensive Rookie of the Year season. He's been incredible in leading the league in completion rate. They've been opening it up more for deeper throws as well the last 2 games. Maybe that is because they finally have another field stretcher and Noah Brown rather than just hammering Luke McCaffrey underneath. But given how the Browns play defense and not only blitzing you, giving it up in the run as well, but also playing a top 3 rate of man coverage in the league, we know historically that man coverage allows for success in running the ball from under center because a lot of the times, unless you put a spy out there, the quarterback has an open lane. So I do like this spot for Jaden Daniels. It's easy to say given that he's the QB1 in fantasy, but I love this spot for Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin, especially if they're going to leave McLaurin on an island out there because McLaurin has seen 30% of his targets against man coverage, has caught 6 of 8. They even in Monday night, remember, and that deep touchdown that he toe tapped, that was recognition by both Daniels and McLaurin where they went to each other and said cover 0 before the play, and they just trusted him. They clearly have a rapport with none other. So to me, it is Jaden Daniels, Terry McLaurin, and then of course Brian Robinson, who Jeremy McNichols, I understand, got everyone a little bit worried. He looked explosive too. Jeremy McNichols, who has been around the league for 9 years, I believe, just kind of played everywhere. But 2 touchdowns, but it was still Brian Robinson's backfield with 21 touches overall in place of Austin Eckler, who sounds like he's still going to be out with that concussion. So the Commanders' offense, those 3 key pieces are who I'm looking to here, Ross.
Well, and I would say this. I thought Watson played really well, which is probably as concerning as anything for the Browns. Like, if he plays really well and they still lose, probably not great.
And I understand, like, any given Sunday, I get that, but it's still, in my opinion, inexcusable to lose when a team doesn't have Max Crosby and Devontae Adams.
Oh, yeah, it's an absolutely brutal loss.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, they won't have the Raiders play the Broncos. The Raiders certainly won't have Devontae Adams with his hamstring and with the trade rumors. I don't know what the deal is with Max Crosby. And the Broncos are not putting up a lot offensively, but they've won back-to-back games.
And there are some pieces standing out. Not that they're going to get there in this game. We talked about it in the first episode. We talked about it last week, in fact, how Patrick Surtain just shuts down everyone he's playing against. And unfortunately, after Jacoby Myers popped last week, a 41.5% target share from Gardner Minshew in his first game without Devontae Adams, he is also now the most likely to receive the Surtain treatment and just get shut down, most likely. So, unfortunate for Jacoby Myers, even though you have to throw him out there, at least as a wide receiver 3 without Devontae Adams. I do think the sneakier option is Trey Tucker, who now in his last 2 games, think back to week 3, matched Jacoby Myers for a team-high 9 targets, and then week 4, he did get there with an end around, a touchdown inside the 5-yard line, showing that they wanted to use him more, and that was kind of their game plan too. I'm sure you noticed against the Browns, to get more wide receiver sweeps, end arounds, things going like that, just to get the running game going overall without their backfield. But Trey Tucker also last week a 25% target share, really showing up as a wide receiver 3 or 4 without Devontae Adams. So someone I definitely suggest we pick up off waiver wires ahead of time, just in case Adams is in fact traded before that November 4th deadline. The sleeper here, though, I want to talk about, the player I think I'm most excited about in this game, and I need to have more courage because it's a scary one, is Javonte Williams. I think Tyler Baday's unfortunate neck injury, sounds like he's going to do well, sounds like they may even try to bring him back late this year, which is very good to hear. But that opened the door for someone to take this backfield over. And at least last week against the Jets, I don't know if you saw the film, Javonte Williams is running hard as hell. Hit the best game of the season, a season-high 16 carries, and then you look across the way and see what this Raiders front 7 has been able to do, and quite frankly, it's been nothing. Jerome Ford last week, very explosive, over 5 yards per carry. Chuba Hubbard had over 100 yards against this Raiders defense. And then both Derrick Henry, who rushed for 84 yards, and J.K. Dobbins, who rushed for over 100 in week 1, scored touchdowns against them as well. So fresh off that usage and with a vacated backfield, I think Javonte Williams is the player to be most excited about here. He may have even been dropped in 10-team leagues because he's been such a frustrating player to this point, but I think this is a really good game coming on for him.
Like it. Like both of those very much. What about Arizona and San Francisco? I was disappointed by Arizona kind of in the last couple weeks, John. I thought after the first couple weeks that they really had something offensively.
It's been tough sledding for the Cardinals offense. And to be honest, I'm not sure why. I don't think it's as simple as saying, oh, Trey McBride was gone out last week with that concussion, and so that's why the Cardinals couldn't succeed against a Commanders secondary that we talked about in the first episode, or earlier this one. Everyone succeeds against the Commanders. But Kyler Murray, that's kind of the issue in fantasy right now. He finishes the overall QB1 against the Rams, and then his surrounding 3 games has been the QB15, QB17, and QB24 last week. It's not been good. It's not as simple, again, as just McBride not being out there. So Marvin Harrison Jr., you're continuing to start him in this matchup, and James Conner, who still just looks like shot out of a cannon at full strength right now. But beyond that, it's hard for anyone else to get there. Even Michael Wilson, you can play him if you're desperate in 12 and 14 team leagues. Led the Cardinals in target share and air yards, 52% of their downfield shots last week without Trey McBride. But beyond that, Kyler Murray, he's closer to a fringe QB1 right now, not a top 12 option, just because of how poor, unfortunately, this Cardinals offense is playing. And on the other side of the ball, at least we saw last 2 matchups against one another in 2023, Kyle Shanahan did have Jonathan Gannon's number, 35 and 45 points in their last 2 matchups against each other. And we saw last week that although Christian McCaffrey is not available, you even mentioned in the last episode about Ed McCaffrey still being encouraged about McCaffrey's return at some point this year. We saw that it doesn't matter so far. It's still the 49ers offense firing on all cylinders. George Kittle, the only tight end to have multiple touchdowns this year. Jordan Mason still looking explosive, getting nearly every running back carry, and both Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk at full strength as well. Even Jawan Jennings, lower target share than the 40% we saw in week 3, but they're finding ways to use him downfield. So given the success that Kyle Shanahan had last year against Jonathan Gannon, it is a situation where literally all 5, 6 including Brock Purdy of the players I mentioned, you just start them this week.
Love it. Let's get to the Packers and the Rams, because there's a lot to get to there. There's injury issues. There's Jordan Love coming back from his injury. And there's someone you like quite a bit in this game as your value pick of the week, which is presented by DraftKings. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Tell me about this Packers receiver that you're so high on.
I like a lot of players in this game against both defenses. But Jaden Reed, although he's finished as a top 24 wide receiver in the last 5 games he's played without Christian Watson, isn't a value. Everyone knows about Jaden Reed. Everyone drafted Jaden Reed very high in their fantasy drafts. So when I think of value for DraftKings, I think of Dontavian Wicks. It's not just about 2 touchdowns last week he had whenever Christian Watson left the game. If you go back in the 7 career games that Wicks has played without Christian Watson dating back to last year, he's averaged 12.5 PPR points, which last season would have been the wide receiver 33 in points per game, so a weekly starter in 3 wide receiver leagues, or with the flex. This year, that's the wide receiver 30 in points per game. So Dontavian Wicks, to me, who currently leads the team in both red zone and end zone targets, is my favorite value pick in this game.
Love it. What about on the other side for the Rams?
There's a lot to talk about here, so let's go ahead and start with the Rams. In week 3, we saw them against the Niners, as we talked about, move to more 2 tight end sets and take Jordan Whittington off the field from the slot. But it turns out that seemed to be something that Sean McVay noticed as a way to exploit the 49ers defense. And it took a miracle for the Rams to finally get there in the end and win that game, but they did win that game. They did not go back to that 12 personnel usage against the Bears this past week. They went right back to Sean McVay's bread and butter of leading the league in 3 wide sets. And because of that, Jordan Whittington led the Rams in routes run. Not only that, but led them in targets as well, peppered underneath in that Cooper Kupp role. So I think Jordan Whittington, their explosive rookie, who actually led the preseason every wide receiver and target per route run rate as well, I think that's someone to be very high on off waiver wires and in this game, especially in PPR league. Someone I'm going right back to along with Kyron Williams. For the Packers, I mentioned Dontavian Wicks. I talked about Jaden Reed. There are 2 other guys I want to discuss before we move on, because I told everyone in the first episode, I have an option for you if you want to drop Mark Andrews and Kyle Pitts. And I think that option is Tucker Kraft the rest of the season, because we came into the year thinking Luke Musgrave was not only the starter, but was going to box out Tucker Kraft entirely after Kraft tore his pec in offseason activities. It has literally been the opposite of what we thought. In the 3 games, because remember, Kraft suffered a shoulder injury in week 3. And his 3 surrounding games, he's run around on 78% of dropbacks. Not only that, but in Jordan Love's 2 starts, he's run around on 81% of dropbacks. An elite threshold for tight ends we look to as every down players. And of course, the target tree just got more condensed without Christian Watson for the foreseeable future for the Packers. So Tucker Kraft is someone I would pick up in place of both Andrews and Kyle Pitts rest of season. And then one more thing, I think it is time to sail high on Josh Jacobs, because he looked explosive as in every touchback out the gates against the Eagles and Colts, 2 defenses that every running back has looked good against this year. But the last 2 weeks, Emmanuel Wilson has been involved more, gaining the confidence of Matt LaFleur. And because of that, Jacobs has only outtouched Wilson 28-22 the past 2 games. I think Wilson is more involved as their pass-catching back, and it's going to come closer to that Bucks and Jets timeshare split in their backfield than we would expect given how Jacobs started the year. So I'm looking to sell high on Jacobs before week 5.
I'm looking to drink as much Labatt Blue Light as possible this weekend because it's delicious. My favorite light beer. Always enjoy it responsibly. They're getting it more places. They have it in Colorado. I don't know if they have it in Kansas City. We'll see when I get there. Delicious Beer, Labatt, USA, Buffalo, New York. All right. What about the Giants and the Seahawks, John? Let's talk about the G-Men in Seattle. Seattle had some explosiveness. Your guy, Kenneth Walker, how about him?
Oh, and Kenneth Walker has looked just incredible. The touch counts, the backfield split did get a little bit skewed because we've seen Kenneth Walker play deep into the fourth quarter in week 1 before suffering their injury. But now we know that in their last 2 games together, including Monday night, Kenneth Walker actually has 75% of Seattle's backfield touches. Just like last year in the 13 games they played together, Zach Charbonnet has only averaged 6 touches whenever Kenneth Walker has been available per game. So Charbonnet, although we're keeping him because we saw that the Seahawks will give him everything whenever Kenneth Walker's out, this is Walker's backfield. And he's earned that, obviously, especially after Monday night's performance. So someone to be extremely high on, given that this Giants front seven, like how Rico Dowdle got there, this Giants defense is just giving it up on the ground, the second highest rate of 10-yard runs allowed. As a boomer bust player, an explosive option, I just don't see a way where Walker doesn't get there as a top 6 option even this week. So someone to be very high on. Geno Smith is quietly the QB9 in fantasy right now as well, although the matchup is not as good for Walker, as Geno Smith has still struggled under pressure, and with Brian Burns on the side of the ball, the Giants, for all their flaws on defense, they're still getting after quarterbacks right now. Jackson Smith and Jigba, DK Metcalf still have our full confidence. We usually don't even talk about those kind of guys on this show because everyone knows to start them unless like a matchup concern comes up. But in this one, we know everyone will probably get there. So those options, go ahead and feel free to start. On the other side of the ball, I would love to tell you that Malik Neighbors is the play here, and it's true if he's available. But I think we're just so far removed from the 10-day rest that we forget Malik Neighbors suffered a concussion on Thursday night. So we need to be wary of his injury. And if he's unavailable, we know that the fallback has been Wan'Dale Robinson. Robinson doesn't run go routes. He's not an explosive player, but he's someone that Brian Daigle has leaned on because he's the outlet for Daniel Jones whenever the offensive line doesn't successfully hold up. And against this Mike McDonald unit, who has just gotten after quarterbacks, I think Wan'Dale Robinson could be pelted with targets here. Even the 7th highest target share against zone coverage, which Seattle's leading the league in. So I like Wan'Dale Robinson as a high-floor, sneaky option for PPR leagues this week.
Okay. Yeah, I know you already talked about Seattle with the Giants. So let's move on to the Cowboys and the Steelers. You know, I'm curious to get your thoughts on the Steelers. Justin Fields got a lot of, I don't know, it wasn't garbage time. He was getting them back in the game. I don't know. Sometimes people call those empty calories. Your thoughts?
Oh, I consider empty calories, like you said, garbage time. I don't think hanging around a 1-score game is empty calories, especially because that's the first game we saw Justin Fields basically have to break out of jail. Like, he had to play like Justin Fields and not stick to Arthur Smith's game plan. And it was great for fantasy. 10 carries, 55 yards, 2 touchdowns, some explosive throws to George Pickens through the air. So we know now if the Steelers are ever facing like that come from behind game script, Justin Fields will probably go absolutely nuts because he has to play like Bears Justin Fields and go completely off script. And that's kind of why this one's exciting, because no DeMarcus Lawrence or Micah Parsons on the other side of the ball for this Dallas defense that has been one of the league's worst against defending the run. And Justin Fields now averaging 9.5 weekly carries, and in 2 similar matchups against mobile quarterbacks, the Cowboys leaked 39 rushing yards to Deshaun Watson in week 1. And then remember Lamar Jackson, 14 carries for 87 yards and a touchdown as well. Not only that, but if we don't think the Cowboys are able to pressure the quarterback without Lawrence and Parsons, Justin Fields has been amazing operating from the pocket this year. The 7th highest completion rate for 8 yards per attempt when not under duress this season. So I really like Justin Fields, so much so that I would start him. We just talked about Geno Smith and what is perceived to be a soft matchup. I think Justin Fields is a better starter than Geno Smith this week. The matchup is just so good for this Steelers offense.
Smirnoff knows there's no I in football. Football is a we thing, an experience that is best enjoyed together with good drinks and good folks. Smirnoff's the world's #1 vodka, an official vodka partner of the NFL. And this year, Smirnoff is giving fans in select areas of the country a chance to win the ultimate game day experience, from tickets to sideline passes and much more. Just head to WeDoGameDays.com until November 15th to enter for your chance to win. Smirnoff, We Do Game Days. Please drink responsibly. Smirnoff number 21 vodka, distilled from grain, 40% alcohol by volume. The Smirnoff Company, New York, New York. Please not share with anyone under legal drinking age. No purchase necessary. 21 plus. Ends 11/15/24. See rules at website for participating areas and other important details. Sponsored by Diageo Americas Incorporated, New York, New York. On the other side, let's talk Cowboys offense.
CeeDee Lamb spikes a big play to ultimately get there, a 55-yard catch, and someone Dak Prescott continues leaning on. I know the first couple of weeks were a struggle, but the targets are still there. I think it's really just because of the way the Cowboys handle their contracts, honestly. And so the fact that Jerry Jones basically allowed CeeDee Lamb to not show up to practice and hold out, despite still paying him and resetting the market at wide receiver, is why CeeDee Lamb has just been a little bit slower than our expectations out the gate. He's still been good, but everyone's been expecting him to be a wide receiver 1 overall weekly, and that hasn't been the case, which is why people are frustrated. But it's okay. Again, we're expecting the Cowboys to at least keep punching back through the air because this ground game has been struggling. Having said that, I think there's someone to have a little bit more faith in moving forward because the last 3 games, they've really been eliminating Ezekiel Elliott altogether. Not to the point where they're close to calling up Dalvin Cook, but they've been leaning on Rico Dowdle more, back-to-back season high and share of backfield touches. Not only leading the team in carries last week, but also did get that one target, turning it upfield for a 15-yard touchdown on that screen pass. So if that's what they're doing now, is trying to implement Rico Dowdle more slowly, he at least shows on bye weeks that he can be an RB 3 or 4 for us, someone we may have to start. So CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson, and then Rico Dowdle, I think, is becoming someone to trust a little bit more.
All right, let's get to the Monday night game because that's my game on radio for Westwood Ones. If anybody's driving around, certainly check it out. Me and Kevin Harlan. It's the Saints and the Chiefs. I guess we'll start with the Chiefs because, again, as we're recording this Wednesday morning, we don't know the exact status of Rashee Rice. Certainly he's not going to play in this game, but I guess there's some discrepancy as to whether he really tore his ACL or not, which I think is so interesting after the MRI. But at any rate, no Rashee Rice for the Chiefs in this one, John.
It's tough. I would love to tell you I'm excited about someone, Xavier Worthy including, stepping up. But really all we saw was Travis Kelce get put on the field for a season high in route rate because they had no other choice. They can't just let him sit back and play limited snaps now. They have to keep him involved. And so Travis Kelce is actually someone to buy high on given the rest of these options. Xavier Worthy even, like I talked about, we had that beautiful 54-yard touchdown. Patrick Mahomes found him in the end zone, broke through DPI, and still caught it. But beyond that, still averaging a 14% target share on the year, plays from the outside as well, unlike Rashee Rice, who was their leading slot receiver. So I just don't know what the trickle down is. Remember, we were in the same situation last year because Rashee Rice for the first 9 games until after Kansas City's bye was not a full-time player. He was just a rotational slot receiver despite being their best option. And yet in those 9 games, think of all the wide receivers they used, going back to Justin Watson, who's going to step in now as their wide receiver 2 by default. Richie James even, Kadarius Toney. All of them behind Rashee Rice combined for just 2 top 36 performances. None of them got there despite having Patrick Mahomes under center. The Chiefs instead just leaned on Isaiah Pacheco in the run game. And I kind of fear that's what's going to happen, not only in this match, but moving forward. That it's going to be Travis Kelce, Xavier Worthy to a lesser extent, and then the running game as the Chiefs just get back to depending on Spags' defense and getting the ball done on the ground. And when you go to the ground then, if you're not excited about the passing game anymore, which I'm not, you think about what's happening in their backfield because it was Carson Steele in week 3. Led the team with 18 touches, looked good too. But then he fumbled on the Chiefs' first drive last week. And from that point forward, Kareem Hunt out-carried the rest of the Chiefs' backfield 16-5. Carson Steele only had 1 touch the rest of the way compared to Samaje Perine's 5. So it looks like Kareem Hunt now is their leading running back, despite Carson Steele having success in week 3. So much so that on waiver wires, if you still have this option, I would actually drop Carson Steele and Samaje Perine for Kareem Hunt.
And the Saints?
The Saints, it's at least a little more easy because it's condensed. Derek Carr has not had success the past couple of weeks. I understand that. The Saints are still dealing with multiple offensive lineman injuries that it's harder to mask. If it's just one guy, that's okay. But if it's now 3 starters they're missing based on their preseason projections, it's a little bit tougher. But the target share is just so condensed between Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed that you keep starting them alongside Alvin Kamara weekly. The sneakier option that I want to talk about here quickly is Juwan Johnson, because Taysom Hill was probably the most integral part of their game plan in week 4, and then he suffered another rib injury after his second rushing touchdown. But then we saw Juwan Johnson play nearly every snap at tight end for the Saints once Taysom Hill was injured. So if you are desperate because of bye weeks or injuries for another tight end to plug in, Juwan Johnson is someone to pick up before Monday night.
Check him out on social media at NotJDaigle. I'm at Ross Tucker NFL. We're at Ross Tucker Pod, and I'm stuffed.
Thanks for tuning in to Fantasy Feast. Make sure to also check out the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Even Money, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcasts on your favorite platform.